Hello and welcome to another edition of Kayak Fishing Weekly. I'm your host, Justin Largen. As always, we're the show on the Serious Angler Network that's dedicated to all things kayak fishing. We've got a fun show planned here. It's a topic that I really enjoy. We're going to talk tidal fishing with an angler who's very good on tidal waters. Tidal fishing is kind of where I got my start kayaking. As you've probably heard me talk about before, used to live in Northern Virginia, was up there for a little over 10 years. And that was sort of the first place where I got a kayak and actually got into fishing. I mean, I'd been fishing for a long time, but that was where I first got into the kayaking side of it. Um, so I've got a lot of time on the Potomac River, fished a little bit the Rappahannock, a little bit the James, the tidal portion, but Potomac is where I've got most of my tidal experience. I should talk to somebody else who likes to do tidal fishing. I just had a chance to go up. Yeah, it's been kind of a weird year. Uh, this is probably the least I've gotten to fish tidal water. Uh, I don't know in the last well, aside from the year I lived in California. Um, but yeah, I just made my first trip about a week and a half ago. Kind of went back to the home pond and it was fun. So I've got the juices flowing and excited to talk about tidal fishing. I wish I got to do more of it this year. So this show will have to be kind of a substitute for that. But before we jump into that, the meat and potatoes, uh, a few news and notes. I want to talk a little bit about a new product. Don't have a ton of information about it just yet, but I am excited. Hobie has released a new Pro Angler for 2025. Now, I don't think it's available for purchase yet. I'm not sure when it's going to hit the market, but I just saw the ad drop earlier this week. Looks really cool. Some nice additions. It looks like they reinforced the hull. Um, Anymore, a lot of the guys who are competitive fishing, and really just the trend in the industry is to for bigger kayaks, almost or we're almost making them more like plastic John boats, but it's bigger boats with motors. So you need to have a sturdy boat to be able to accommodate these larger trolling motors to carry the extra weight of these batteries. Even though they're lithium, they're not light still. They're lighter than lead or lead core batteries, but they still got some weight to them. So as I understand it, the hull is sturdier, so you've got the ability to carry that extra load. They've done some cool things with wiring, making it a little easier to run wiring, power all your electronics in your motor, and then it looks also like they've got some plates in the back, so you can very easily attach a motor now, more simply than you could in the past, and then similarly power poles. If you're so inclined, you can put 2 power poles on the back. They've already got, places set up, plates, I think pre-drilled to where all you gotta do is slap that thing on there and screw it in. So that is a cool product. I'm anxious to see more info about that and actually, kinda get my eyes on one of them. But that's what I guess the one topic I wanted to cover outside of tournament news, and it's a little bit weird. Um, we're recording this as, simultaneous to Bassmasters award ceremony for their season finale, Caddo Bistino down in Texas. Super bummed that I'm not there. Wanted to fish it, but maybe next year. So I don't have the results of that just yet. What I think I'm going to do is get to the meat and potatoes of the show here in a minute, and then jump back at the end, scan, see what the final standings were, and give those guys a shout out. One thing we do know at this point, congrats to Russ Snyders. He is now a two-time Bassmaster Angler of the Year. I did see they've already announced that Russ is AOY again and back-to-back AOY. So first for the Bassmaster Kayak Series. Not surprised. Russ is kind of putting a silver, or not even a silver lining. It's not a silver lining. His season's been awesome. I was looking. I don't think he finished outside of 12th, at least prior to this event. I don't know how he finished on Caddo Bissino, but I think his worst finish was 12th, which is pretty insane. I would say he deserves Angler of the Year. Um, Last thing I will touch on before we jump into the show, the Native No Limit Big Bass Power Hour. That happened on the Susquehanna River October 19th, just a couple of days ago. Looked like a fun event. Looked like it was a little bit tougher fishing for a lot of guys. Still, a lot of fish got caught. There were 122 anglers and 499 total fish caught. I won't go through every hour's big bass winner, but the overall big bass went to Jacob Hausman. He put up a 20 and 3/4 inch smallmouth, beast of a fish. I'm looking at the photo now. It's a heavy fish. Uh, it looks like it's 4.5, 5 pounds. Um, yeah, awesome fish there. And then for the actual no limit portion, catch as many fish as you can, 14 inches or bigger. And let's see, I want to shout out the top three here. So Jacob also was the third place overall finisher with 244 inches. In second with 311.5 inches, Josh Sims. So congrats to him. And then your overall winner on your no limit side, Logan Bloomfield with an impressive 348.75 inches. So he definitely caught him well, and it looks like he's got a good average. I'm looking at least his top 15 fish, and it's a bunch of 16 and 17 inch fish. So congrats to those guys. I did not get a chance to do a no limit tournament this year, but I am hoping to do one next year. It's a cool format. You're never really out of it, no matter how tough the day is. You can have no fish, and with 1 hour to go, with 5 minutes to go, you can catch one bass, and it ends up winning you a lot of money. So that's a cool event. Congrats to the top finishers there, and yeah, I think that's all we're going to get to as far as news and notes. Again, I will jump back and check in when we wrap up recording. So at the end, I will figure out who took home the trophy down on in Shreveport. Um, yeah, I want to give those guys some shine, and I'm antsy to see who won there. So I guess without further ado, it's just about time to bring our guest on. All right. So I'm always bad at introductions. I'm just going to bring Tray on here. And Tray, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff. Uh, Founder, owner, innovative sportsman, um, make a bunch of cool products. The Osprey kayak, the rock guards, another popular item that you guys make. Uh, you are a Hobie TOC qualifier for this year, top finish this year. Local hammer, great angler. I appreciate you giving me some time, Trey, and coming on the show.
Sure, glad to be here.
And we're I wanted to kind of talk tidal fishing because it's something I love to do. I lived
Mhm.
up in Northern Virginia for a long time. Potomac was kind of home, and it's kind of how I got into kayak fishing. Uh, it a little throw and go kayak, my very first one. It was perfect for little tidal places that I could sneak into where the boats couldn't go. But I'm curious to hear about your start. I know we've talked before, but I've never heard kind of your origin story for the kayak fishing.
Yeah, so I grew up catfishing on the local rivers here near Frederick, Maryland. I grew up really close to the Monocacy River. It was about a 300-yard walk from my house. My dad used
Nice.
to take us fishing. We would just go beat the banks and sit there with worms and chicken livers. And my dad actually really enjoyed fishing for carp. So pretty much all my life was catfishing or just bank fishing on the rivers, a little bit on the Potomac, the upper Potomac. So how I evolved to bass fishing, I'd actually moved from the Frederick County, Maryland area. We went out in the Western Maryland near Hancock, Maryland, and up there was all new to me, and I was still working down the road. So I actually stopped fishing and hunting for a couple of years, really, because I was still working down the road and I was working so much, didn't have time, time to fish, and then started our family at that point too. So just a lot of things going on around that 2004, 5, 6 time. So not a whole lot of fishing going on, but I worked with a guy, and he was a bass fisherman. He kept talking to me. He's like, "Hey," he's like, "you need to go bass fishing with me," because we would talk fishing, but he wasn't a cat fisherman. He was, a bass fisherman. So I was like, I don't know if I want to go. I said, I've caught bass on the river before and in some ponds, but never really targeted them. And he's like, "Man, you need to go with me." So actually, I finally gave in, and he had a an aluminum john boat set up for electric only lakes, and he took me to the Black Hills Lake, or Black Hills State Park here in Maryland, Little Seneca Lake. And if you know the place, it's got giant largemouth in it. There's tiger muskie in there. Just a really, they actually have snakehead in there now. They weren't when we went. We went probably, I would say it was 2011 or 2012, somewhere around there when we went. So we went out first thing in the morning, go all the way to the back, and he hands me a rod with a buzzbait on it, and I just start throwing a buzzbait around. My first largemouth was a 2.5 pound largemouth on a buzzbait. So, and I was hooked from there. Top water is still my favorite way to fish. But yeah, we fished the rest of the day, and after that, he was like, "Hey, you need to go with me again." He's like, "But I'll take you to a different fishery." And he said, "Be completely different. I'll teach you what I know if you really enjoy it." And we went to the Lower Potomac. We went out of Slavin's launch and went towards the back of Mattawoman Creek. So, went down there
Slavins.
again. Yep.
Is that the one, like, in the back?
Yep.
No ramp fee or anything?
Correct. Yep.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
So
that was where you got your start
yeah, we
in
went
bass
there and
fishing.
then we went up. He was explaining to me, of course, the pads or the spatter dock was all new to me. And actually he started me out throwing a buzzbait again because it was high tide. We were throwing a buzzbait through the spatter dock at high tide, getting blow ups and stuff. And we didn't have a whole lot of fish that day. I think we were fishing like July, so it was, tough to fish. Um, but I mean, we had a great day. He had like a 9.9 horsepower Honda he used to throw on the back when we went down there. Um, Same boat, just a 16-foot John boat, set up the way he liked it, where it was convenient for him to fish out of, and he could take one other person if he wanted. Spent a few days down there, and then I think it was like a year into it. I told my wife, I was like, I need a John boat because we live so close to the river. I'm tired of fishing off the banks. At that point, my oldest son was probably 3 or 4, and he had not done any fishing off of a boat or anything. And I was like, hey, let's get a boat. She actually got me a boat for Father's Day, and we went out on Father's Day, and we went fishing. Just took some worms, something that my son could catch some fish on. But from that point on, it was, how can I rig this thing to catch smallmouth on the Upper Potomac? And had a couple friends up there where they had been fishing out of jet boats for a number of years, and they really taught me how to catch the smallmouth up there, which is completely different than the Susquehanna. The Upper Potomac, and you get south, stay in the river system, but it all fishes the same down there. And then you get the Shenandoah. It fishes very much like the Upper Potomac, which they both fish nothing like the Susquehanna. So, but as far as tidal water goes, it's still my favorite because it's where I got my start, and it's a puzzle. It's very it's I like to figure the fish out. And I'm not one of those guys that'll go out, and if I don't catch any fish or I only catch one, the day's ruined, it's been lost. No, I just enjoy being out there. And if I don't catch a fish, then that's on me, and the fish beat me that day, and I'm going to get them on the next day. I don't. I've fished with people. Actually, one of the guys who really got me into bass fish, or got me catching smallmouth on the Upper Potomac, he was one of those guys where if he didn't get any fish, or he wasn't getting the right fish, he would get aggravated and he'd want to leave early. And I just wasn't like that. I was out there because I enjoyed it. And, you know, I, I'm not one to get aggravated and get off the water. Um, Never really tournament fished or anything until I'd say 2015. Um,
Okay.
we um, we started entering tournaments up on the Upper Potomac and stuff, and that's where you really see those guys start to unwind that weren't catching fish. And I can see myself going that direction sometimes because I'm competitive. I want to do well, I want to win, but
Sure.
I learned, after a couple of years of competing like that, that it doesn't do you any good to get mad. Some days
Yeah.
the fish just don't cooperate the way you think they should. Somebody's always going to catch them. You know that yourself. You can't. It's usually, if it's a tough day on you and you're a decent angler, it's usually a tough day on everybody. But there's going to be one guy that catches them. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it started spending a lot of time in tidal water and doing a lot of research, YouTube videos, figuring it all out, and when's the best times to fish, where the fish are going to be, different times of the year. So yeah, it's a big giant puzzle, and I love it because of that, because of the challenge. I'm that kind of a person that just likes the challenge.
I'm with you there. The puzzle makes it fun. I wish
Yeah.
I had as good an attitude as you do. Like I'll I don't know that I've ever gotten off the water like because I'm angry. I'll fish like to the bitter end,
Hmm.
but yeah, I'll be salty if I don't catch them. If it or I don't know. And I think a lot of times I'll have the expectations too high. And it'll be a good day. I just expected it to be a great day, and
Right.
I'll catch myself sometimes not being grateful for kind of what you do catch. So
Yeah.
at least for me, it's an easy mistake.
I think one of the things that has made me just appreciate being on the water is up around or in Western Maryland, Hancock, Maryland. If there's a body of water, it's probably been beat to death, and it's hard to catch fish. So I fished a lot of those places because it was a challenge. But numerous days you go out there in the heat of the sun and sweating your butt off and not catching anything, and you just get so used to. And Black Hills, Little Seneca Lake is the same way. That place, after once the water thaws out and you're allowed to get on it, there's people on it immediately. And in late spring, when it warms up, people like kayaking and renting john boats, and it just gets so pressured. You can go there one day and absolutely smash them, and the next day you'll zero. And tidal water is the same way. I've had that happen to me numerous times on the lower Potomac. The upper bay has done the same thing to me, where you go out and you think you have them figured out, and then you go out the next day and they're just not there. I had a pretty good record the last couple of years of going on a 2-day tournament on the lower Potomac, and just completely doing terrible on day one, and then day two would come out and smash them. And I just come to understand that that's the way it is down there, and you can't always expect them to be where you left them in practice, or even the year before. They're going to be around. You just have to figure out where they are and what they're eating.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool things about tidal fishing is it's like an extra like the bass fishing to me is already a puzzle, kind of like you were saying, where
Mhm.
you got to figure out kind of where are they, what's the mood, what bait's gonna catch them on. But then you throw that tide in, and it's like an extra extra wrinkle. And I don't know, I think that part of it, it's like an extra challenge. It's constantly changing. The stuff never stays the same. Where, some of the other places that, uh, like Northern Virginia has a lot of these smaller waters,
Mhm.
similar size to what you're talking about with Seneca, where, you can go there and it's, you know, a lot of it, there's not grass. You're just fishing kind of the same, for me anyway, fishing the same laydowns. It kind of gets repetitive. But I can go on some of these tidal places, and it's in the course of an hour or 2, it's almost like you can stay in the same general area, and it's almost like you're fishing a different lake.
Right.
It's, stuff's constantly moving, and you're trying to, like, figure it out. It's part of why I love it, but Man, my record's kind of like yours on the Potomac with those KBF tournaments. And I've done it both ways too. I'll catch them the first day and then just nothing the second day, just embarrass myself.
Yeah.
But did you visit the year that the wind blew? I think I was in Aquia. It was 21 or 22, and some of the sketchiest water I've ever seen on the Potomac. Like, it literally was blowing out of the northwest and hard enough to push all the water out of Aquia. And I've seen some, weird stuff like that before, but
Yep.
that was about as crazy as I've seen.
I fished that year, the Saturday. See, here's the thing: the first couple of years that KBF came, I would avoid Mattawoman like crazy. That's my bread and butter. That's where I go. But on day one, you just have so many kayakers there, and I like to fish by myself or with a friend or a couple of friends, a small group. But when you get a whole group of people, um, I just like to get away from the crowd. So those first couple of years that I fished the KBF on the Lower Potomac, I would find other water. In that year that you're talking about, where it blew the water out, I started looking at the map, and I'd been in the Belmont Bay area on a boat before. I'd never been there on a kayak, and there's a state park right there, right up in the bay. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go there. It doesn't open. I don't think it opened until like 7 or 7:30 or something. I was like, in order to avoid the crowd, I'm probably going to be the only one there. Um, I'll wait until, they open up the gate and I can get in. And I got up there, and I knew that it didn't have like an actual boat ramp. But I was in a kayak and I had a set of wheels, and there were like three steps you had to go down to get
Yeah,
water.
I know the one you're talking about.
So I get there, and I get out of the truck, and I want to go look at the steps because I've never laid eyes on it. And I walk out there and I'm like, where's the water? It was about a 25, I would say 25-yard walk on the beach, which wasn't supposed to be a beach.
Yeah.
Luckily it was hard packed, it was like sand. But it was like beach sand, so it didn't sink. I could leave the wheels on, and I drug the kayak out. And once I finally got to water, and I could get the kayak to float and get the wheels up, I put the wheels up and I get in, and I couldn't put the motor down for like another 50 yards. So I was paddling against that wind, and the rollers coming in, beating over. I was in my Old Town Predator at the time. So I was paddling out through that, and I got to deeper water. And when I say deeper water, it was barely deep enough for the motor. And I was trying to get up into the creek right there. And I was like, man, there's so little water here. I don't even know if there's going to be any water in the creek, but I know it's a big spawning area for the fish to get into that creek. So I went up in there, and literally the creek was like 12 feet wide. So I went in, just about all the wood was out of the water. I was like, man, where would these fish go? They can't, like, they've got to be in this channel. Because that's the only place the water was in the channel. And I didn't catch anything in there. I came out and fished Belmont Bay, but it was shallow all the way around. I did end up catching a snakehead and I think 2 bass that day. And that was day one. And then day two, I was like, you know what? I'm going out to Mattawoman, where I know. I went to Slavin's launch, and that was the year that I found. I call it my spot, because I've been there a couple of times and done really well since then. But I went out and I picked this cove, and I went to this cove, and there's like 40 pilings in the water, and at low tide they're out of the water except for the very bottom of them. At high tide you can't see them. And it's tough for the boats to get to this area at low tide. So I was back in there, and it was 30 minutes into the morning, because I ran there right away first thing, because I had found them. I think Jake and Jeff and I had pre-fished there a couple weeks prior to that, and I caught an
Okay.
18-inch fish there. So I went straight to there. It was neat because you could hear turkeys gobbling in the woods, and the weather was calm. It was completely different than Saturday. And then 30 minutes into it, I hadn't caught a fish. I was like, I don't know if this spot's going to pan out. And then I caught one. And then it was on from there for the next 3 hours. I was just catching fish after fish, and they were all 14, to like 17 and a half or 18 inches. And that was the day I ended up in third. And NVKBA that year, they were doing your best 5 fish for both days, not your best 10 Saturday,
I remember that.
Sunday. Yeah. So I think I caught all of my fish on Sunday, and it was the best 5 fish for both days. So I ended up winning NVKBA, and I finished third for that day for KBF. And it was the first big check I'd ever got. And then like I said, I've been back to that specific spot a couple of times and done really well. I think it's more of an early season spot because it's before any of the grass or anything gets up. Because once the grass gets up, they kind of leave those pilings and they'll get up into the spatter dock and the grass a little bit more. But
Gotcha.
it's like there's other spots around like that, and in the last couple of years, like MAKBF, we've been just a touch later going down there, and that spot just hasn't provided as many fish as it has in years past. But I still always go back there just because the memory of sitting there and catching fish after fish, and I sat on this 50-foot square spot that day for 3 hours and just caught them and caught them, so it was cool.
That's one of the fun things. You reminded me of a day that I was out near, I guess it's near Mount Vernon. I can't remember what that creek is called, but there's a big spatter dock field. And it seemed like every other time I was there, there's almost no water in it. But just one year I happened to go in there and the grass was like there was some, I guess it was milfoil and hydrilla that was kind of mixed in with it.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, the tide was up and the fish were just stacked in it. And that one day was one of the more memorable days I'd ever had in the Potomac. Just going through that grass bed, I'd go down it, I'd turn around and go right back down it, and you just keep catching fish. And it's magical when you find a day like that. But I went back so many times since and just never they were never using it.
Yeah. That's one thing that spot has taught me is like, especially on tidal water, when you I used to catch a fish and, roll on down the bank, just keep going. That just fishing there, that was the first time I'd ever sat on one spot and caught multiple fish. But it's always taught me just because you caught one doesn't mean you've caught the only one. And, you're not necessarily trying to catch schooling fish. You're just catching fish that are stuck to cover. And that was the pretty much the only cover in that area. So I say I always, but I catch myself sometimes casting, catching a fish, and then rolling down the bank, and then I'll get, you know, 50 or 100 yards away and be like, hold on, I need to go back there and at least cast at it a couple more times to see if there are more fish on it because, I'm so used to power fishing a river and just going down the bank because typically on a river, you catch a fish on a log or on a rock, you're probably not going to catch more and you just move on and just keep going down the river, maybe come back there later because they're going to reset up there.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, definitely tidal water and stuff, definitely look for those fish that are grouped up and on a certain piece of structure.
That's a really good tip. I've found that as well, and I especially before I, got a kayak with pedal drive and motor and all that, I I tended to be more of a stay put kinda guy. Like, I'd pick an area and I'd I'd throw, mix through different baits, but, I would just beat it to death. And
Hmm.
I think that's part of why I got this complex with tournaments about going to the same place the 2nd day in a row. It's like very few times I've actually been able to do it, um, and actually, like, go through an area and catch them well because I feel like I sit in a really small area and just beat it to death, and those fish don't wanna play the next day.
Right.
Uh, but the title, like, Potomac was one place where I feel like you can do that,
Yeah.
and I think the Chesapeake's another I don't have nearly as much time up there, but I've been out there a few times and it's kinda similar. If you can find an area, there's not just one fish. Like when you get bit, a lot of times they'll be grouped up and you can even catch fish like the same, consecutive casts. I remember punching one year, just I think it was milfoil, and I can't even remember what creek it was, but I just remember this one little patch of matted grass and punching a big weight through it, catching a fish, going right back to it, uh, literally, releasing that fish, pitching the exact same hole, catching another fish, and I think it was 3 casts in a row.
Yeah.
And for me, that doesn't happen a whole lot of places where they're grouped up like that, where it just, I mean, I feel like they're shoulder to shoulder, but
Right.
it's one of the cool things that seems like it always surprises me is the other thing. Like, I go super shallow in tidal places. Is that something that you do, or do you get in the super skinny stuff?
I try to, yeah, because there's, a lot of your tidal water gets beat up by bass boats. The Lower Potomac, the Upper Bay, there are tournaments every weekend, sometimes Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you can get to that water where there's boats, those boats can't get to, or even other kayakers won't even test getting into, because you have to be careful on tidal water. You don't want to get into an area
Mm.
and the tide goes out and then you're stuck.
Yeah.
Um, I've heard some horror stories about people getting stuck in the mucky water that you can't actually walk through, and they try to get out of their kayak and they get stuck, and there's people that have died doing that because they get caught in the muck, and then when the tide comes back in, their legs are caught and they can't get out and they end up drowning. Um,
Ah.
my my son actually got into a bad spot this spring, and he got back into some tidal water, and he came up and his legs were covered in the mud, and I'm like, what did you do? He's like, it got shallow. I had to get out and push through. I was like, don't do that, please don't do that. We were fishing MAKBF, and I was staying within range where I could hear him and see him. Most of the time he might go around the corner or something, but he went back into this little cove, and I was out at the mouth of it, and he was like, I don't know, 75 yards from me or something, right around the corner, and he came out covered in mud. I was like, hey, don't do that. I've heard horror stories, and that stuff is nasty. It sucks you in, and the suction won't let you out, and you can't necessarily pull yourself out with your kayak. So, um, heard some horror stories about that, and that's one of the things about tidal water too that makes it change so much is every day the tide is a little different. The tide is always changing. It's never the same time every day. And then, today it might come in and low tide might be a foot higher than it was yesterday, or it might be lower than it was yesterday. You have to have, I use an app on my phone. I forget what it's called, but just for the tide and to know what it's going to be day to day and what times, and I needed to learn, like, hey, the tide is being read here. So for Mattawoman, it's read out on Indian Head Point, but in the back of Mattawoman, it's not the same time for low tide as it is out on the point. So I had to learn all of that stuff too, all the little details and everything. But my absolute favorite time to fish tidal water is the last 2 hours of the outgoing tide when it's super low, like
Yes.
when it's going to be super low. It just pushes those fish into groups, and they're hanging on to any little bit of cover that they can. Um, Actually had that conversation with the guys on the leadership group of MAKBF, because I was on that this year. I was like, hey, when we do the tidal water, we're going to look at the tidal map and try and plan the day. And they're like, man, that's a lot to try and put it on a certain tide on the weekend. It's just hard to do. We have to pick a date that works for MAKBF and doesn't interfere with other national trails and stuff like that. So it's really hard to get the tide to match up with your tournament day.
Yeah.
But we definitely try to do that, because like there's absolutely better times to fish the tide. And if you can catch low tide first thing in the morning, it doesn't get much better fishing than that. Because anytime you fish late in the evening or early in the morning is typically the best times of the day to fish, depending on the time of the year. And then if you can fish tidal water early in the morning at low tide, or with the tide going out the first couple hours of light, it just it's a lot better. You get a lot more activity of the fish. And over the years, I've learned to fish different tides at different times of the day, but I've still not found a better time to fish than, once that water's warming in the spring, first thing in the morning with an outgoing tide, it doesn't get any better.
Yeah, that's my favorite, and I'll even take the first little part of the incoming.
Mhm.
And it's not to say you can't catch them other times.
Right.
I've had some really fun days on an incoming, but, like, it just seems like more consistently, I always whenever that water it's like it just takes the lake and shrinks it down. There's
Yep.
less places they can go. Like we were talking, before we started recording about the tournament going on down on, Caddo.
Mhm.
Um, I'm pretty sure I don't think they drop Caddo, but Bistineau. I think every year around this time they start lowering that lake, and I think that's part of why the fishing's so good down there is you're just shrinking the amount of space. Those fish live in this much water, and now you're giving them this much water, and
Right.
it just you're putting your bait in front of more fish.
Yep. And it makes them compete for the food because they have a smaller area to eat, and it's yeah, especially
Yeah.
with those cypress trees and cypress knees and stuff. There's still my favorite like stuff to fish other than tidal water is lakes with cypress trees. Like that's where we're going for the TOC, and I've got a love-hate relationship with Santee Cooper. I always do well pre-fishing there, and then tournament day something changes, and it bites me. But um, I'm going to try and do something that fits my comfort zone. I always go down there and try to fish for the giant fish because that's what you want to do. You want to go down there and catch the giant fish and put a good limit of 5 fish up for 2 days straight. And if you can go find those giant fish in the lake, that's the way to go. But my comfort zone is moving water, or small coves and just stuff that, like we talked a couple minutes ago, stuff that other people won't get into. That's more of my comfort zone. I know the last time I fished there, I pre-fished for bedded fish, and I had like 20 or 25 beds marked, and I don't ever bed fish, and I won't ever do it again because we had that storm roll through and they canceled Saturday, and then Sunday we went out and there wasn't a single one of those beds that still had a fish on it, and it was heartbreaking because that was all I had. I went and tried to find other stuff in those areas, but I couldn't find anything. I ended up So we fished only Sunday that year, and I'm pretty sure I only caught one fish, and it was at like 2:30 or 3 o'clock, right before lines out. Literally like 10 minutes before lines out, I caught one.
You get
But
your first clue at the very end.
yep.
Sucks.
So I mean, it is what it is. I've had some really good days of fishing down there, just not on tournament day. So hoping to change that this year. I'm changing gears a little bit, fishing a little bit different. Plus, it's the fall. You know, I don't know what it's going to fish like in the fall. We did go down this summer because I've never seen it after the spring, after all the grass and everything grows in.
Hmm.
When we fish it in the spring, there's some vegetation, but I was like, it's got to get choked out in certain areas. So we went down. I think it was in July. My wife and my 2 boys, we went down. We took our boat down just to run around and see parts of the lake I've never seen before. Um,
Oh,
so
they're massive too. There's so much water.
yeah, and we went down and we didn't. It was July. We didn't catch. I didn't catch any fish. My oldest son caught one largemouth and one catfish, and he hooked a giant bowfin, and it threw the hook right at the boat. But we had a decent trip running around. They got to see an alligator. They've never seen an alligator in the wild before. They've never been on a lake with cypress trees, so it was more of a scenic trip for the family than anything else. But
Yeah.
um, I've never been there in the fall, so who knows what's going to happen this fall. I've been doing as much research as I can to figure out where the fish go. Um, and it's no different than to me. I feel like it's going to fish a lot like tidal water in the fall. Tidal water in the fall is tough for me once all the vegetation is thick and heavy, and it's there's so much vegetation it's almost overwhelming, and you don't really know where to start. I've fished the lower Potomac a couple times in the fall, a couple of tournaments. I've never done well. um, but I so my son, I'm a boat captain for their high school fishing team, and
Nice.
They had the Maryland State Championship at the beginning of October. And I told him, I was like, and unfortunately, I didn't have time to go down and pre-fish or to go down and look around. But I told him, I said, it is tough in the fall. We're going to go down and do the best that we can. And I think we ended up with 2 fish or something for a 5 fish limit. And it was tough on a lot of people.
Yeah.
But talking with the other anglers and the other captains and stuff, I was able to pick up how they were catching them and things to look for in the fall. And a lot of the guys were absolutely forthcoming with information, didn't have a problem talking about it. And I told them flat out, I've never done well here in the fall. This place is always very overwhelming to me in the fall. And, they said that the fish are absolutely in the grass and the vegetation, but a lot of those guys were targeting the sporadic vegetation, not the big grass mats. Because we got locked on this grass mat and we started throwing a frog because there were fish blowing up everywhere, but we just couldn't get them to come up on the frog or any other bait that we could bring across the top. But these guys were fishing mats that were a lot smaller and out there by themselves and just swimming baits by the mats, not necessarily through them, because apparently those fish were setting up on the edges and just waiting on bait to come by. So
Gotcha.
learned a little something there. Hoping to get out, do some more fishing this fall. So we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping to get out next Friday or this coming Friday. My birthday's this Friday, so I told my wife I'm going fishing for my birthday this year. So.
Well, early happy birthday to you.
Thank you. I'm pretty excited for it. I think I'm going to take my boat out. I haven't actually been out on my boat by myself. I always take the boys with me. But the last time I took the boat out and had a really, really good day was I took my my 11-year-old out to the Upper Bay, and we went out on the grass flats this past spring, and he
Nice.
caught his personal best largemouth. I caught like a 20.5-inch largemouth, and then he caught his first snakehead. So it was an awesome day. We got it all on film. I just haven't had a chance to edit any of it yet, but it was that typical late spring bite, and they were right where they were supposed to be, and we had a good morning. So anytime I can get my younger son out and put him on fish, I feel pretty rewarded, because he's the kind of kid that he likes to go and he'll fish for a while, and then he'll set his pole down. He'll just stare. And then if I catch one, he'll get up and he'll start fishing again. I don't pressure him. He just enjoys being out on the boat, on the water. Same with a kayak. I'll put him on a kayak with a motor on it, and he'll fish for a little bit, and he'll just run around with the motor for a while, and then he'll fish some more. And, just try to keep him engaged and enjoy it however he wants to enjoy it, not, hound him and say, oh, well, you need to be throwing this or throwing that. And, I don't want to discourage him from fishing. So he
No,
typically,
that's good advice. I don't have kids myself, but my younger brothers, I would drag them out with me, and like especially the younger of the 2 brothers.
Mhm,
Like I'd have him. He was my camera guy. In case I catch a fish, you're there to take a picture. But and I'd give him baits, and he just he enjoys it, but he doesn't enjoy it like at the insane level that I do. Like where
right,
I'm willing to be out there like sun up to sundown.
right,
And, after 2 or 3 hours, if it's, hot and, it's not pleasant, we're not catching anything, he's just kinda, like, head down, like, basically just curled up,
right,
that was back when I had my little pond prowler, but I've tried to be a little better about it since, and I think you're right. You can't uh, make them like it. You can't even. I mean, it's hard enough for me to catch fish, let alone put somebody else on fish.
right.
But I like that. Just kind of let them go at their own pace and don't pressure.
Yeah. My older son, he's good with not catching a lot of fish because, he pretty much learned how to bass fish with me. I started bass fishing, and like I said, we fished that water up in Western Maryland that was just highly pressured, and there'd be multiple days where we would go out and just not catch anything. And then, he would throw baits and just try and catch panfish, and he would catch panfish to keep himself active and happy about the day. But he's just recently started tournament fishing, and he's got the high school thing with the boats, and he fishes on a kayak with me. And he has that mindset where he just enjoys going out and enjoying the water. And if he can do well in a tournament, then that's just icing on the cake.
I think that's the healthy way to look at it, is when you can be happy about being out there and not need to catch a fish. It's you just, I don't know, there's no pressure. There's, I don't know, something about it. I'm not always, or not even often, able to get to that point. Usually I'm I'm competitive. I want to catch these fish. I want to figure them out. Um, but yeah, there's definitely the days that I can just sort of relax and not have too high expectations are some of the more fun ones.
Yep. Yeah, I've learned
Um,
that if I put a lot of pressure on myself and, you know, thinking I got to do well, I've got to, you know, catch a limit early and then go for big ones, or however I choose to, plan my day. Those are the days that I typically don't do well. If I go in with no expectations and just go fishing, because I typically do pre-fish better than I fish on tournament day. And it's not because I'm going to an area and I'm beating them up, because a lot of times I go to a different area pre-fishing and just see what the fish are staying, like what cover they're staying at, or what bait they're liking, and then I'll go and fish another area. I very rarely pre-fish an area that I'm actually going to fish on tournament day. Um, if I'm in an area that I'm going to fish on tournament day, I'm usually just looking and maybe throwing a bait around with no hook or something, trying to see if I can get them to react. But um, you know, that's kind of how I approached the Harris chain this year at the beginning of the season, which is what qualified me for the TOC. I fished an area that set up a lot like the Tidal Potomac. Early spring,
mm,
a lot of sporadic grass, and basically did well in that tournament, ripping a chatterbait through grass, exactly how I would fish the Lower Potomac. And there was no rhyme or reason as to why the fish were where they were, because I was letting the wind blow me around and I was just fan casting, and it was just grass. And I knew there were fish there. They were all staging there waiting to go spawn. But it was one of those times where you just had to know in your mind that the fish were there. And if you keep casting, you're going to catch a fish. And that's what I did both days. I had bedded fish that I saw in practice, but I knew in my mind there's no way that I'm going to go target these fish and waste time when I know that it's going to make me frustrated if I go there and they're not going to bite, because there's nothing more frustrating. That's about the only thing that can get me frustrated is seeing fish and not being able to catch them. And the
yeah.
Susquehanna is one of the worst places for that to happen, is because you always see giant smallmouth cruising. They see you and they spook, or you see a giant wake going across the water because you just spooked a fish, and it's very frustrating. But to me, bed fishing is a lot like that, especially if you see them and you can't catch them. I did have about a 7 pounder on the Harris chain that I couldn't
Woo.
get to turn on a bait, and I did spend about 15 minutes there the first morning. I was like, you know what, this fish isn't going to bite. The way the vegetation was over top of it, it was hard to get a bait there, and I was like, I'm not even going to waste any more time here. So I just went out and fished it like it was the Lower Potomac, and casting through grass, and if it got hung up, rip it through the grass. And a lot of times that's when I got bit, was as soon as you ripped it through the grass and you went to reel up your slack, that's when you got bit. So I'm a power fisherman. I don't like to slow down. If I'm slowing down, it's usually a Senko or a Ned rig, which both of those work. I love throwing a Senko when the bite is on, but I would much rather throw a chatterbait or a spinnerbait.
I like it. So chatterbait and spinnerbait, that's your 1 and 2 for tidal water?
Yep. This year, I will say that I started throwing, actually, it was last fall, I started throwing large paddle tailed swim baits on like the Susquehanna and stuff, just because I know I can go up there and catch them fishing like I normally do. But I was like, I want to try something different. I have, you know, I had some large paddle tails and I never threw them. I was like, I'm going to go up there and throw these. And it's a fun bite. It changes the pace of things and just really lets you know how aggressive those fish really are. Um, I've yet to duplicate that bite anywhere else. I know a lot of guys will go out and throw glide baits and everything on these big bodies of water that we go and fish, but I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the confidence in it. I know those Susquehanna smallmouth will absolutely crush them. So I have the confidence to do that. And I typically try and stay to my confidence baits. I would say about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I was before that, I bought into the hype of, oh, you need this bait, you need this color, you need all this. And I had so much stuff that it was overwhelming. And then I watched one of Gerald Swindle's videos about, the KISS method, keep it simple and stupid. And I was like, you know what? I have all these different colors and all these different styles of bait, and I only catch them on a handful of colors or a handful of baits in like 2 colors, 3 colors. So I'm usually throwing white, um, golden shiner when it comes to chatterbaits and spinnerbaits, and Senkos and jigs. It's green pumpkin or black and blue. And I say I threw out a lot of baits. I really didn't. I put them all aside so that I wasn't staring at them anymore. And my son found them, and he's like, "Oh, you can't throw these away." So he has them all, and now they're all currently in our boat. So um, they're not in the way in the boat. And if we ever decide we want to, throw a different color or a different style of bait than we normally do, they're there. I know I'm not going to do it on a kayak. I know what I throw on a kayak, and I really try and lighten the load as much as I can. And just basically, it's not lightening the load of weight on the kayak. It's the load of thoughts in my mind as to what am I going to throw, or what color, what bait. It's very simple for me, the way I keep my stuff. And the biggest thing for me is what presentation am I going to throw that bait on. That's the biggest decision that I make. I've also learned to trust my gut. If I'm doing something and my mind says, "Oh, you should be throwing this," early on, I would take that as yeah, maybe I'll try it later. But it took one time for me to think, "Oh, that fish just came up and swiped at that. I should probably throw a weightless fluke and I might catch them." And I tied a weightless fluke on right away and ended up doing really well in that tournament that day that I was fishing. And ever since then, I was like, you know what? If I have a thought come to my mind, like I'm not actually thinking about it, but I see something and it sparks something in my mind, and I think, oh, I think they would have eaten this. Then I change it, because even if it doesn't work, at least I tried. But a lot of times it does work, because instinctively I'm thinking, oh, that fish is doing that. He's going to eat this, without actually thinking too hard about it. I think most people overthink it. And that split second thought in my mind of, hey, I think he's going to eat a fluke, or, it's chasing this and swiping at it. If I kill it when he swipes at it, maybe he'll come back and eat it. Certain little things like that that really has helped me become a better angler, is just paying more attention to what my instincts are telling me, and not just doing the same thing that I've been doing for the last hour and not catching anything. So,
Dude, that's really well said. Really well said.
mm,
I like that. I like how you put it about it's not even the weight of the stuff in the boat. It's like in your head. It's
yeah,
like the mental clutter.
yeah,
Um, I I mean, you see a lot of guys, and not everybody has a different style, and fish is different. But I've made that mistake of just, this is what I'm going to catch them on, and just till I'm blue in the face, and just go down swinging with something, and not listen to that little voice and make a change.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, you look at a bunch of guys like somebody like a Drew Gregory, like the success that he has had, like in our sport, like he's doing the Gerald Swindle, keep it simple. He's got a handful of things that he's confident in. I mean, it's the same thing you're doing. I think there's a lot of sense to it, and that, I'll say the same way you did. We overthink it too much. I've spent an ungodly amount of money on tackle, and I've got so much stuff, like stacked up. I've started going through it and just, hey, this is stuff that I'll probably I haven't thrown it in a year, haven't thrown it in 2 years. It probably works. I'm gonna box it up and donate it or do a yard sale or something. But
Yep.
I've gotta, like, periodically purge the stuff.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that doesn't necessarily mean that I always throw the same thing. You know, when I'm pre-fishing or fun fishing, I'll go and try new stuff. I love a frog bite. It's not often that I'm confident in a frog bite, but there will be, you know, if I'm pre-fishing a place and it looks like a frog might play, I will throw a frog. Um, but if I don't catch them pre-fishing, I won't break it out on tournament day. But there was a tournament that we had MAKBF last year. I forget the lake. It was up in Pennsylvania. It's a trophy bass fishery, and I got way up in the back
knock
and
a
knock a
mix in or
mixin'.
something.
Yeah, knock a mixin'. I got way up in the back of this creek and actually got to the mouth of the creek where it lets out, and there was a 12-foot wide channel, and there was grass on both sides. And I got to the back, and the grass, it was 6 foot deep in the channel, and then right at the mouth of the creek, the grass closed up. I was like, that's interesting. That's different. You know, all the way back, you have this channel, and then it stops and where you have the creek coming in, and the water it's flowing, but really slowly flowing. I was like, oh, maybe a frog will work here. And pre-fishing, I caught 3 fish over 18 inches there, and I'd pre-fished a couple weeks before, so I actually caught them and wasn't trying to shake them off. And I was like, wow, that was pretty neat. So that's where I went tournament day, and I think I caught 2 on a frog there, and I had to finesse fish the other 2 of my, short limit that I caught. I don't think I caught 5 that day, which a lot of people didn't. But just goes to show. I don't normally throw a frog, but pre-fishing, I was like, man, that looks froggy, and I'm gonna throw a frog. So I did, and I caught them, and definitely, I would say frog fishing is my favorite way to fish, only because of the adrenaline and having to calm your nerves when they eat that frog for 1 or 2 seconds before you set the hook.
Yes.
I'm actually really excited for my son, either one of my boys, to get on a frog bite. They have yet to do that, but seeing how they handle the whole, don't set the hook right away, hold on, and then now set it. And when you set it with everything you have. Um, but I mean, I've been on a frog bite, not on the Lower Potomac, but I have on the Upper Chesapeake Bay. I've come to really enjoy fishing up there as well. But it's the same thing. One day you can go up there and do well, and the next day you're like, where did the fish go? I do have a couple of spots on the flats in the spring that are waypoints on my graph, and I can typically in the spring, if the weather is right, I can go there and catch at least one good one and a couple of other fish to fill out my limit. But we went there this spring, and the weather was horrible. It was raining, and
Mm,
it was windy, and my son was with me. It was the first day we were on the Conowingo Reservoir, and we did good there. That was a great day for me because I told my son, I said, we're going to set in at this boat ramp, and we're going to run across the lake. It's going to be windy. So we're going to take our time. We should be the first ones there. And I said, we're going to sit at the mouth of this creek, and we're going to catch a ton of fish. A lot of them are going to be shorts. But as soon as we get our limit, we're going to leave, because I've never caught a good fish there, but I've caught limit fish there. And that was my goal, was to get us a limit early. We went there, and immediately he was throwing a grub and I was throwing a Ned rig, and
okay.
we were catching them like one after another. He caught the first one. I was right behind him. We're fishing a section that's 30 feet wide, throwing in the same hole, fish after fish. We probably caught 25 fish in the first 45 minutes. And we finally each got a limit of fish after 45 minutes. And I was like, hey, it's time to go, because they don't get any bigger in here. They just stack up, and they're largemouth and smallmouth, which is, anytime you can go to any body of water and catch both largemouth and smallmouth, I'm in for it, because it doesn't get any better than that, because you could be hooked up to a giant largemouth or a small smallmouth. You never know till you get it up to the boat. But so we left there and we started fishing around, and I ended up upgrading had a 19-inch smallmouth that I upgraded with, and but it just felt good. That was the first tournament where we had both gotten limits. I actually have that on camera as well. I haven't edited it yet.
Nice.
I've got 4 SD cards full of footage and just haven't edited them yet. But I won't delete them because I think 2 or 3 of them are me and one of my boys, which is memories that I don't want to lose. So
Yeah.
we both got our limit that day, and then we were staying up there. So we stayed in an Airbnb, and then got up Sunday morning and went to the Upper Chesapeake Bay, and it was raining. We actually sat in the truck for the first hour because it was a downpour and it was cold, and I didn't want to take him out in those conditions because it's just dangerous, and
It's
with the wind
miserable
and
too.
stuff. Yeah, with the wind and stuff. So we waited for it to slow down. Finally, put our kayaks in the water, and we went out and we fished a small cove because the weather still wasn't great. It was still raining a little bit, but the wind was the big thing. And we fished this small cove, and I think he picked up 2 fish in the cove. And then we came back and fished the marina, and he picked up another one. And I think I had 1 or 2 at that point. He was beating me at lunchtime that day, and he was so excited. And he just needed another fish for a limit. He had caught 2 catfish that he thought were bass that were going to fill out his
Oh,
limit. And then right after lunch, he lost dexterity in his hand because he was so cold. And I said, we need to go back to the truck. Like, you need to go warm up. And I knew if we went back to the truck, he probably wouldn't want to come back out. And for safety reasons, I couldn't keep him out on the water. And as we were leaving the marina to go to the ramp, it stopped raining, and the sun didn't come out, but it did get a little bit warmer. And we were headed back towards the ramp, and he's like, Dad, are we going to go out? Because I wanted to go out on the flats because it was the right time of year, and I knew the big fish would be out there. So he's like, are we going to go out on the flats? I was like, that's up to you. I said, I need you to be completely honest with me right now. Are you okay? Like, are you going to be good? Because it's hard to get that chill when you're wet and cold. It's hard to get that chill out of you. And he's like, I'm going to be fine. So we went 3 miles down on the flats, and within 10 minutes, I'd caught a 20+ inch largemouth, and I caught another one that was like 16 and a half or something. And I'd passed him. I had 4 fish at that point. I don't know if he caught a limit that day. I ended up catching another one for a limit. I think he got a limit that day, but
dude's a trooper.
yeah, but he stuck it out. And the thing was, he had a couple of bites out on the flats, but he was struggling because the dexterity in his hand had never come back. And he was struggling with the bait caster because he couldn't get his thumb to work to, stop the
Oh,
spool. And it was a mess. But he pushed through it, and he had a great day out there. I was glad that he got because the whole time I was talking about, man, we need to get to the flats. We need to get to the flats. I was just glad that I could take him out there and show him this is why I wanted to go to the flats so bad, because there's this area every year just produces giant fish for me.
yeah.
And that's where I'd taken his brother out a couple weeks before on the boat, where he caught his personal best largemouth. And always good for a snakehead or a big catfish out there too. But the Upper
Yeah,
Bay is one of our favorite places.
there's a reason those boats all stack in that area. Those bass boats when they
Yep.
have tournaments up there. It's a cool place.
And I hate a community hole, and that's how I found that like 4 years ago on a kayak. I saw a bunch of boats there. I was like, oh, all the boats are there. I need to learn how to fish the flats and fish this grass. I'm gonna go out there. I went out pre-fishing and caught some fish, and then tournament day, it was real foggy that day. This was like 3 or 4 years ago. And I was like, you know what? We're launching before the boats. As long as I get to the spot before they launch, I'll be good. And I knew it was a 30-minute run for me, and it was going to be about 30 minutes before the boats went. Right before I got to the spot, you could hear the boats take off, and I got on the spot, and it was so foggy that you couldn't see more than 50 feet. And so the boats were coming in. You could hear them come off a plane, and then you could hear them talking amongst each other. And I had caught 1 or 2 early that day, but we were just passing each other because we were all fishing the same area. And I had this one spot, and it's like 50 yards by 50 yards that I would just go through and then turn around and come back. And it was one of those days where if you caught one, you tried to keep it hidden. You didn't want to make a bunch of splashing because you didn't want them to come in on you. But I've had really good luck on the Upper Bay that the boaters up there are always really pleasant, and they don't come in on you like they do on the Lower Potomac. A lot of times on the Lower Potomac, they get a little close,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're out there and it's comical because you watch a guy on a boat catch a fish. That day, a guy caught a fish and he didn't have his net out, and he was fiddling around trying to get his net out, and the fish came off as he was trying to get his net out. So then the other boaters were over there making fun of him, and it was just a good time. And everybody had a great attitude, but it was a good day on the water. So um, I don't mind community hole fishing when it's comical out there, when the guys are giving each other a hard time and it's all in good fun.
Yeah. And that's one thing that with at least the tidal fisheries I'm familiar with, the Potomac, it can definitely be a community hole. You'll have a lot of boats, kind
Yeah,
of kind of like the flats, just on a smaller scale. These good grass beds that seem to always hold fish. There'll be a bunch of guys in there, but it it's interesting. It's not my favorite way to fish at all,
right.
but it's interesting when you're in there and you see somebody catch one. It seems like the fish all fire at the same time.
Yeah,
It'll be a lot of people catching them, and, like, that's that can, for me, like, be a motivation. It's like, "Oh, they just caught one, it's about to turn on. We're
right.
getting ready to get bit."
Yeah,
But
that little bit of hope can go a long way. It's like, going all day without catching a single fish, and then you catch one. It rejuvenates the idea that they do live here, and you just keep fishing and you'll catch them.
yeah. Well, Trey, I appreciate you coming on. I wanna give you a minute, because I know you got a well, I'll let you kinda talk about whatever you wanna talk about, but your Osprey kayak is really cool. I think it's perfect for the style of fishing. Like, I see Jake's videos. I know it works great on the Susky,
Hmm.
but I think it's perfect for tidal fishing too. But
Yeah.
I wanna give you the floor to talk about that or whatever else you wanna talk about.
Yeah. So I would say over the past year, for the most part, we've really taken our inventory of items that we offer and taken it down because to build the brand, we had come out with a lot of different products for as many options and people that we could to be able to motorize their kayaks was where we started. So we were making brackets for kayaks that didn't have the four-hole bolt pattern to put a motor on and all this stuff. And in the past year, we've really scaled back a lot of that stuff because, we've built the brand. People know who we are, and honestly, a lot of that stuff that we had developed, it just sat on the shelves. You would get, one to five people a year that would need a certain adapter plate, and it just sits around and collects dust. And we run a business, and in order to run a business, you need to make money, and you can't make money with products sitting around on the shelf. So we've really scaled the business down as far as amount of products that we offer, and started really looking at it like, all right, what is needed in the market? What do people need? So we've gone away with a lot of the adapter plates that just sat around. The rock guards are a necessity. We make rock guards for both the Torpedo and the Newport motors now. Um, we are a Newport dealer as well as a Torpedo dealer, and we've came out with our own line of inflatable kayaks that we have the Osprey, and then we have a 12 and a 14-foot. And we collaborated with Jeff Little. He brought us the idea, said that he had pitched it with other companies, but nobody really bit, and they weren't really interested. And Jeff's the one that got me into the business. And if he sees an opening in the market for a certain thing, I really have to take that into consideration as to, where it could go. And when he started talking, inflatables and stuff, I was like everybody else. When you hear inflatable kayak and fishing hooks, you just think that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But after prototypes and testing the durability of these, our inflatable kayaks are reinforced in the areas that they need to be reinforced. The whole bottoms of our Osprey are double layered materials so that I've drug them on blacktop. We drag them across rapids or shoals or whatever you want to call them. On the Susquehanna, I've drug them across the rapids up there, or even where the rapid should be when the water is low. I've drug them across dry rocks, and they're pretty sharp up there. Really, the only thing that we haven't tested them on would be the oyster beds in the tidal water. I've never fished anything like that. Would it hold up to that? I don't know. From what I'm hearing from everybody, it's like razor blades, and it doesn't sound like it would hold up. But like for every other application, like tidal water, when you get into a lot of vegetation or grass, these ospreys, they sit in 2 inches of water, and you can paddle over top of that vegetation. You're not trying to push through it. You're actually going over top. They're very efficient with the motors. There's not a lot of drag, so makes your battery last longer, makes them faster. They're not extremely lightweight like a normal inflatable because of the extra material. They're a little bit wider for stability, but they're still lighter than a rotomolded kayak. So with the four-sided track that we have on them, that adds a little bit of weight, but also that four-sided track allows you to put accessories on 3 of the 4 sides of the track, and then the bottom side of the track that actually sits on the kayak itself. That's where I hide all my cords and stuff for my electronics, my power cables. They all get shoved in there because you don't have a hole to run them through. So that fourth side on that track gives you a little channel to put that kind of stuff. So we've got the Osprey out there, and people love them. We've had really good feedback from all of our customers, and then so we want to come up with something a little different. The Osprey has a base price of $2,000. It's just under $2,000, and we want to offer that more throw and go, lightweight, inflatable kayak that people think of when they think inflatable kayak. So we've got a new one, a prototype coming in. It's a little bit shorter. It's going to be lighter. It'll be the track will be available for it. It'll be a single-sided track, but you don't need it. It could be, if you want that throw and go kayak that you can deflate and then inflate when you want to, you can carry it to a spot and then inflate it and then put the seat on it and then just get to those hard to get to spots, whether it be a creek or a river or whatever. We're going for that part of the market as well, to offer something a little bit different, or maybe as an entry level kayak for someone. But it'll be a kayak that you can get where you just have the inflatable platform with a seat, and then you're like, oh, I really like this. I want to accessorize it now. So then the track would be available. It's going to have a motor option as well, or you could do just the track. So it's going to be a very versatile kayak that you could buy all the accessories for it, but still use it as a throw and go because you don't have to have the track on it. Just trying to hit a different part of the market. I know there's several places that I'm going to be using it because that you just can't get a normal size kayak in there. It's just not feasible. So kind of the direction of the business is going a lot towards inflatables and making accessories for inflatables. We want to make accessories for all inflatables, but obviously our brand is going to come first because we need to make sure that ours is as accessible as possible. So working on accessories for our inflatables, and then getting the new one out here, getting it tested and seeing if it meets all the expectations that we have so that we can get on the market for our customers. But so far I think the inflatable part of the business has done well. We're always working to make it a little bit more efficient so we can have more stock available, get them out the door quicker and stuff like that. But our customers have loved the ones that they have, and we've gotten really good feedback. So really excited for that. I'll be in one for the TOC.
Nice.
Originally, before this year, I had not fished alligator infested waters with an inflatable for the obvious, thought of alligator, toothy critter inflatable. But then, you think about it, a big alligator can bite into a rotomolded kayak just as well as it can an inflatable. And a rotomolded kayak is 1 chamber versus our inflatable is 3. And if you have a chamber that goes down, you still have 2 more keeping you afloat. So that's kind of where I put my mind at ease when I went to the Harris chain this year, because that was the first place that I had fished alligator infested water in an inflatable. But it was key because it allowed me to drift around over top of those grass mats and catch those fish.
Yeah, it's got a good track record in gator infested
Yeah.
waters. So I'm excited to see that new version. It you, you've built a very good brand, very good reputation. I know that stuff is durable. Um, I may end up in one before it's all said and done.
Yeah, we'd love
I'm
to get
trying
some
to,
feedback on it.
yeah, especially like I love it. Like I bought a throw and go. I guess it's 18 months now, a little over a year, because I noticed I wasn't taking the bigger kayaks in some of these little throwing like these little like little ponds or a little creek somewhere that's doesn't have much water in it. A little tiny kayak you can get into places that these bigger pedal drives or it's just the more standard kayak anymore doesn't work as well. And especially if you got to trailer it, these little
Right.
kayaks are fun. Um, that's kind of how I got my start. It was a canoe kayak hybrid wilderness made, and I just keep it on top of the car, and on the way home from work, throw it in one of the little tidal creeks off the Potomac and fish until it was dark.
Yep.
I think it I think it's what's the word? It makes the sport accessible for a lot of people.
Right.
You don't it's to me it's one of the coolest things about kayaking is you don't need to break the bank. You don't need a 50,000, $100,000 bass boat. You can go out there and enjoy these beautiful places and and still get out there and see them in a smaller craft.
Yeah. And that's where Jeff's mind's at most of the time is how can he get more people fishing to enjoy the outdoors, or how can he get them to catch more fish? I mean, Jeff really doesn't have any secrets when it comes to catching fish. He shares everything on his YouTube channel, and it's because he enjoys hearing about people that he has helped catch fish or just enjoy time on the water. And that's where I think he's great for for us and helping us develop these kayaks, because he's always thinking of how to make them better. And he's always got new ideas, and I hate when I have to tell him no, but sometimes you have to tell him no, because it's not about profit or money with Jeff. But if I did every idea that Jeff came to me with, I would be broke, like because Jeff absolutely, like, he just wants to get more people on the water, which is he's a great asset for the business for sure.
Fantastic ambassador. Well, Trey, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate you making some time. I know you're staying busy this time of year with the football, well, coaching the football.
Yep.
I hope you guys have a great season. I had the game started.
Yeah, so we just finished our regular season. Yesterday was our last game, and we finished our regular season undefeated. And the boys have only allowed 12 points, 2 touchdowns all year. So we've got a fantastic team that works hard this year. They're sixth graders, and so they're starting to, being sixth graders, they're starting to change a little bit. The boys are starting to get a little rowdier, and they're getting stronger. So it's really good to see them develop the way that they are. So really excited to see the way we're going. So we go into playoffs next week, and then we've got a championship in 2 weeks.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good luck in the playoffs, and
Thank you.
then good luck. We got about a month, and you'll be down at Santee. So best of luck down there.
Yep.
I'll be rooting for you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks again, Trey.
Yeah.
Tray Leach, ladies and gentlemen. That was fun. I love talking tidal fishing. I could do it for hours and hours. But yeah, that would not be fair to Trey. Um, so yeah, now I think I'm going to put this on pause. I'm going to jump over and figure out what the final standings were for the Bassmaster, and then I'll jump back on and wrap up the recording with the results. So I will be right back. All right, I got the results pulled up. It looks like Caddo Bispheno was a slugfest. And I kind of knew that after the first day. 37 limits on day one that were 90 inches or better, 29 on day two. So, slow down a little bit, 5 limits over 100 inches the first day, 3 on day 2, and let me switch to total. We'll start with 3rd place, Abby Abendanza. He was the day 1 leader, put up 102 and 3 quarters on day 1, back it up with 94 and a quarter to end with 197. Congrats to him. Matt Scotch, big day 2. I think he put up the biggest bag of day 2, 102 inches. That was backing up his 96 inches on day 1, gave him a total of 198. And then the winner, Gene Jensen, Luke Master, 198 and a half inches, put up 98 and a quarter day 1 and broke 100 today. Congrats to all those guys. I am very jealous. I wish that I was down there. Looked like an absolute slugfest, but it was actually a lot of guys caught them. It took, I don't remember what the exact, pull it back up. Let's see what it took to get a check. I think they paid 19 places, so 183 inches. A lot of tournaments, 183 inches, you can win or be right there. This one, you snuck into check range, but 180 inches didn't even get you a check. Caddo Bistano, it's a fun place. If you've never been, you got to get down there. Even if it's not for tournament, if it's just for fun fishing, that place, it's a special place. All right. Well, let me see. There we go. Stop screen. All right. All right. What have I got left? Kings of the week. Kings of the week. I think that'll do it. And it probably won't be a huge surprise. I talked about it at the onset. Talked about Russ. I had already seen that he was the Angler of the Year winner, and it's I don't know how I'm running out of ways to say nice things. He's just a phenomenal fisherman, and he's one of a kind. I don't know that there's ever going to be anybody that dominates kayak fishing the way that he has the last few years. 2022, he won the championship. 2023, he won Angler of the Year. He backed it up with Angler of the Year this year. This is all on the Bassmaster side. So, very, very impressive. Russ Snyder's. I just can't give to anybody else. Russ is our king of the week. And that'll do it for this edition of Kayak Fishing Weekly. Thanks again to Tray for coming on. A lot of fun talking tidal fishing with him. I feel like it's such a big topic. We'll have to revisit it. There's more to discuss with tidal fishing. So we'll revisit the topic at some point. But until next week, remember to take a kid fishing.